My name is Walter. The woman sitting beside me is Evelyn. We've been married a long time, long enough that people stop asking questions and start offering congratulations. They look at us and think the hard parts must have happened early, like childhood illnesses, something you grow out of. That's not how it was. There were years when I counted our anniversaries quietly, not because I was proud, but because I wasn't sure the next one would come. If someone had warned me when we were young, I don't think I would have listened.
People assume longevity means as they don't see the years where staying felt heavier than leaving. I remember sitting across from Walter at the kitchen table, the clock ticking louder than it should have, wondering if we were still moving in the same direction or just sharing a roof out of habit. Love didn't disappear. It thinned.
The first thing that weakened us didn't arrive with noise. It arrived with numbers. I never wrote them down, but they were always there. The lawn, the repairs, the long days at work, every task stacked neatly in my head waiting to be used as proof. When Evelyn asked for help with something else, I'd feel something tighten. I wouldn't say no, but I wouldn't say yes cleanly either. I thought silence was harmless. It wasn't.
I had my own list, meals that appeared every evening without discussion, 3 children whose lives I organised around school bells and doctor visits, nights when one of them burned with fever and I stayed awake listening to their breathing while the house slept. When Walter came home exhausted and said so out loud, I nodded and added another mark. Resentment doesn't rush, it waits.
Nothing dramatic happened. We didn't shout. We didn't threaten to leave. We just started weighing everything. Marriage became quieter, colder, like a room where someone turned down the heat a degree at a time.
The habit broke because of a question I wasn't prepared for. Our oldest daughter was grown by then, already carrying her own disappointments. One afternoon, while we were folding laundry, she looked at me and said, "Mum, do you and Dad even like each other?" The dryer hummed. Dust floated in the sunlight. I didn't answer right away.
When Evelyn told me later, the house felt different. Same walls, same furniture, but something had shifted. We loved each other. I know that now. But somewhere along the way, fairness had replaced closeness. Accounting had replaced curiosity. We didn't stop counting that day. We just began forgetting to continue.
The next problem didn't look like a problem at first. It looked like personality. I plan. I always have. I like knowing what tomorrow asks of me before it arrives. It makes the world feel steadier. Walter has never worked that way.
I've always trusted the day to unfold. Schedules make me feel trapped, like I'm already late for something I haven't enjoyed yet. For years, we treated this difference like a flaw one of us needed to fix. She tried to explain. I tried to escape the explanation. Neither of us felt understood.
I thought if I explained better or more calmly or more firmly, he would change. He thought if I relaxed enough, I'd stop needing plans. What we didn't realise was that nothing was broken.
Her planning wasn't control, it was safety. My looseness wasn't irresponsibility, it was how I stayed present. Once we stopped correcting each other, the house softened. She kept the calendar. I brought home small surprises that didn't fit on it.
It wasn't perfect, just quieter. And after years of noise inside our own heads, quiet felt like relief. I've always made lists, not because I loved order, but because order made the world quieter. I liked knowing what was coming 3 weeks from now. It helped me sleep. Walter never understood that. He moved through days the way water moves downhill wherever it wanted. For a long time, I thought this was something that could be corrected if I explained it carefully enough. If I explained it firmly enough, I'd ask why he couldn't just decide in advance. He'd ask why I couldn't just relax. Each question landed like a small accusation.
Her list felt like walls to me. Dates circled in ink, times written in pen, everything already decided before the day even arrived. I wanted space. She wanted certainty. We argued about plans, but what we were really fighting over was permission to be ourselves without apology. Neither of us knew how to ask for that.
I honestly believed that if he changed this one thing, we'd be fine, that our lives would finally line up the way they were supposed to. Instead, the more I pushed, the smaller he seemed, and the more he resisted, the more alone I felt. It turns out trying to remake another person doesn't make them better. It just makes them quieter.
What shifted wasn't a breakthrough conversation, it was fatigue. We were tired of being disappointed in each other for things that had always been true. Evelyn didn't plan because she was rigid. She planned because it steadied her. And I wasn't careless. I just found joy in what wasn't scheduled. Once we stopped calling these traits flaws, the arguments lost their fuel.
I kept the calendar, handled the money, made sure the future had a shape.
And I brought home things that didn't have one. A short drive at sunset, flowers bought for no reason. A day that ended differently than expected. We didn't fix each other. We adjusted the space between us. For a while, that was enough.
Until it wasn't. My next mistake didn't look like anger. It looked like patience. I let small things pass. Comments that stung, promises forgotten. I told myself it wasn't worth the tension, that peace mattered more. But silence doesn't dissolve discomfort. It stores it.
I didn't know any of this at the time. From my side, things seemed calm. Then one evening years ago, I forgot to bring home milk. Just milk. When I walked through the door, Evelyn was standing in the kitchen, hands still, voice shaking. And suddenly I was being accused of never listening, of never caring, of always forgetting. I remember thinking, this can't be about milk.
It wasn't. It was about months of feeling invisible, about asking quietly and being answered accidentally. The milk was just the last thing I could hold before everything spilled. If I had spoken earlier, softly, clearly, we might have talked. Instead, I waited until my words came out sharp, and sharp words cut even when they're honest.
That night changed something, not because we resolved it, but because we saw the cost of waiting. We started talking sooner, not better, just sooner. This stayed with me. This hurt more than I expected. It felt awkward, exposed, but it felt lighter than carrying months of unsaid things.
The conversations didn't fix us, they prevented explosions, and then slowly another quiet thing crept in, comfort.
We knew each other too well, or thought we did. Days began to run on habit instead of intention. We talked about groceries, appointments, bills, not about thoughts, not about fears. The house was full, but the space between us felt automatic, like breathing without noticing the air.
I don't remember when we stopped paying attention. That's the frightening part. Nothing broke, nothing ended. We just assumed what we had would keep running on its own.
After a long while, long enough that it didn't feel like a change, we settled into something that looked like stability. We knew each other's routines by heart. We'd survived illnesses, raised children, paid things off. It felt reasonable to assume the rest would carry itself. We stopped dressing time up as something special. Evenings became instructions, groceries, appointments, a bill that needed attention. Somewhere along the way, we stopped sitting across from each other. The television filled the space between us. We shared a bed. Mostly we shared silence.
I didn't notice it happening. That's what frightens me now. There was no moment where I said, this is the day we stop choosing each other. There was just comfort. And comfort slowly replaced effort. We lived side by side. We functioned well. We felt fine.
Fine is a quiet word. It doesn't complain. It doesn't ask for anything. It lets years pass without resistance. The curiosity went first, then the small gestures. Not because we stopped caring, because we assumed caring was permanent.
What shook me awake didn't happen in our house. Friends of ours, people we'd known for decades, separated after nearly 40 years. Everyone was stunned. They seemed solid, dependable. Later, she told me they hadn't been unhappy. They'd just been existing. That word stayed with me. Existing. She said one morning she realised she didn't want to spend whatever time she had left simply occupying space next to someone. I went home and sat at the kitchen table. Late afternoon light slanted across the floor. The fan hummed. Dust hung in the air. I imagined the years ahead looking exactly like the ones behind us, and I felt afraid.
Evelyn didn't panic. She didn't accuse. She said if we could start eating at the table again. No screens, just plates, chairs, us. It sounded small. That's how most changes begin.
We began asking questions that didn't solve anything. What have you been thinking about lately? What made you laugh this week? Sometimes the answers were short, sometimes there were none. We started walking in the evenings, not far, just long enough for the house to miss us.
We brought back time without a purpose. Ice cream eaten in the car, cards on the kitchen table. Nothing impressive, just attention. It felt unfamiliar at first, like using a muscle we hadn't moved in years.
Then there was another mistake we had lived inside for so long it felt normal. When we argued to win.
Every disagreement turned into a contest. Who remembered better? Who worked harder? Who was right? I didn't notice how often we were standing on opposite sides of the same problem.
Winning felt hollow. Losing felt worse. Neither of us ever left a fight feeling closer.
The shift came when our middle child, already grown, already weathered, came home carrying more than his suitcase. He was older than I'd been when I became a father, and he was broken in ways I didn't know how to fix. Evelyn and I disagreed about what he needed, but fighting wasn't an option. So we talked, slowly, carefully. We listened more than we defended.
Helping our son reminded us of something we'd misplaced. We weren't opposing forces. We were standing on the same side, facing outward. When we remembered that the arguments changed shape, they softened. They stopped being about victory.
We still disagree. We still misstep. But now, when things feel heavy, I try to remember the difference between standing across from someone and standing beside them.
Time doesn't announce what it takes from you. It just waits for you to notice what's missing. Some days I wonder how many moments slipped past us while we were busy being fine.
Somewhere along the way, we stopped standing across from each other. I can't tell you exactly when it happened, only that arguments began to feel different. Less sharp, less urgent to win. When I remembered that we were facing the same direction, my words changed before I noticed my thoughts had. I didn't reach for what would hurt. I reached for what might clarify. Sometimes I asked her to explain something again. Not because I disagreed, because I wanted to see it the way she did.
We still clash. Even now, after all these years, irritation shows up uninvited. Walter still forgets things that matter to me. I still plan past the point of necessity. The difference is subtle. We recognize the pattern sooner. There's a pause now, a breath, a moment where we step back before old habits finish the sentence for us.
Nothing about this feels heroic. It's quiet work. Most days choosing each other looks like correction. A sentence stopped halfway through, an apology that arrives earlier than it used to.
60 years is a long time to share a life. Long enough to watch people leave for good. Long enough to raise children who become strangers and then slowly friends again. Long enough to lose things you thought were permanent and discover which ones were. We are not the people we were when we started. I wouldn't recognise her, she wouldn't recognise me, but we changed in the same direction.
Sometimes I think about what I would say to the younger version of myself. Not advice, just a warning maybe. Pay attention sooner. Notice what you're protecting instead of listening to. But I know how that would have gone. He wouldn't have understood. Time hadn't taught him yet.
That's the strange thing about living. Understanding doesn't arrive when it's convenient. It arrives when it's earned, usually late, usually quietly.
We don't pretend to know what comes next. Bodies slow down. Days feel shorter. The house holds more echoes than it used to. But when something heavy appears on the horizon, I no longer feel like I'm bracing alone.
We sit at the table more now, not because it's a rule, because it feels right. Sometimes we talk, sometimes we don't. The light changes, the room breathes, and I think about how easily all of this could have slipped past us if we hadn't noticed when fine stopped being enough.
We won't be here forever. That thought used to frighten me. Now it simply sharpens the edges of what remains.
Some nights when the house is quiet and the window is half open, I wonder how many moments we almost missed by assuming there would always be more.